J. Trump.
Back. We got over 70%, close to 75% of the people.
بنده همون رو به چشم گذاشت. تسلیحات بازدارنده
Coming up on the show, President Trump's Board of Peace is set to meet for the first time. On agenda, plans to rebuild a devastated Gaza Strip. Also on the show, Iran and Russia conduct Navy drills amid US threats of military action on Tehran. That's not all. An ex-UK Prince Andrew has been arrested for misconduct while in public office. We'll also tell you why Bill Gates has pulled out from the India AI Summit. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Sahil Meghani and this is the South Era Report. Let's start with our top focus this Thursday. US President Donald Trump is set to convene over the first Board of Peace summit in the US. The controversial meeting comes almost 3 months to the day after the UN Security Council backed a US proposed ceasefire plan for Gaza. And that plan, remember, included a 2-year mandate for the Board of Peace to oversee the reconstruction of the devastated Palestinian enclave. Take a look at this report filed by my colleague Shabnam Nasimi.
President Trump announced a Board of Peace in October last year, which was supposed to help Gaza, and they're meeting on Thursday this week in Washington. So let's take a closer look at what the board is really about. In January this year, he signed a charter for something he calls the Board of Peace at the World Economic Forum in Davos and positioned himself as the chair. It's supposed to oversee the ceasefire in Gaza, coordinate reconstruction and maintain stability. On paper, it's a multinational body with a 2-year mandate from the UN Security Council, which voted in November last year to adopt Trump's 20-point plan as the framework for Gaza's post-war transition. But the charter doesn't actually mention Gaza, Israel, or Palestinians anywhere in the text. There's concern that this could expand well beyond Gaza into other conflicts, essentially creating a parallel system to the United Nations that answers to Trump alone. While the board will likely move faster than the consensus-driven United Nations, it will need to navigate common pitfalls of its donor-led coalition of the willing model. The question on many minds is now, will it work? Well, Trump insists that everybody wants to be part of this new body, but it may not be the massive success the president hopes it would be. Trump has invited dozens of countries to join this Board of Peace, yet only a handful have so far signed up. And the world's other major powers, traditional Western democracies, and most of the UN Security Council members outside of the US are either absent or refused outright. Countries that have joined the board include Argentina, Morocco, Vietnam, Pakistan, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, Hungary, Egypt, Turkey, Qatar, Jordan and Saudi Arabia. The UK hasn't joined. Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper says that it's a legal treaty that raises broader international issues. France explicitly cited concerns about sidelining the UN when it declined Germany calls it incompatible with their constitution. For most governments that have declined, the worry is that the board could sideline the UN and further weaken the rules-based international order, the systems of treaties, institutions, and norms that have governed international relations since World War II. The board would also oversee a Gaza executive board, a Palestinian technocratic committee responsible for day-to-day governance, and an international stabilization force with a mandate that includes permanent disarmament. But here's where it gets interesting. Trump didn't just create a board, he created a club with a price tag. Member states serve 3-year terms, after which they must pay $1 billion for a permanent seat. That's the entry fee. And these funds are supposed to go towards Gaza reconstruction, but there's no independent oversight. Critics say that the structure is susceptible to corruption because Trump has sole control over spending, contracts, and which projects move forward. There's no transparency requirement and no independent audit process in the charter. The bigger issue is the concentration of power. Trump doesn't just chair the board. While president, he chairs it permanently, even after leaving office. He appoints members, he removes members, he decides which conflicts the board addresses and whether it expands beyond Gaza. Beneath Trump is an executive board of 7 people. There's Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, Steve Witkoff, the US Special Envoy to the Middle East. Then you've got Tony Blair, the former UK Prime Minister. Blair is divisive in the Middle East largely because of his role in the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And here's the part that should really make you pause. There is no Palestinian representation on this board. The Board of Peace could be a genuine mechanism for stabilizing Gaza and getting aid to people who desperately need it. Or it could become another layer of politics that delays reconstruction and keeps Palestinians in limbo. One important lesson to take from previous cases of UN transitional administrations, ranging from East Timor to Kosovo, is balancing the top-down control with local leader involvement. Right now, Gaza's future depends on whether this board can deliver on its promises or whether it's just another experiment in international intervention.
We are going to stay with this subject, but bring our focus down to South Asian perspective because Pakistan is one of the countries attending this Board of Peace Summit. And to help us decode the significance of Pakistan's attendance, South Era Network spoke with Pakistani journalist Talat Hussain earlier in the day. Take a look at what he had to tell us.
There are several reasons for Pakistan to accept the invitation. One, Pakistan has been part and parcel of the whole process that started once this whole idea came up. And being a very important member of the Muslim community, it had to discuss this idea and evaluate it on the basis of its ongoing policy. And the ongoing policy is actually a very consistent policy as far as the Palestinians' right to self-determination is concerned. So the big debate in Islamabad really was that this idea has come up, though it carries the decisive stamp of Donald Trump. Should we be part of it? Should we not be part of it? Should we endorse it in principle and not really go there or vote in its favor by our feet? That is, walking up to the meetings whenever they take shape. So the decision was made that since this is already a done deal and other heavy hitters who have Palestinians' cause close to their heart, like Saudi Arab, like UAE, like the Qataris, have already endorsed it. So Pakistan should go with the flow. But the core issue remains that Pakistan has been consistently championing the cause of the Palestinians, and any initiative that translates into some relief for the Palestinians and pushes them closer to their genuinely internationally endorsed aspiration to have their own homeland ought to be endorsed. So that was really the basis for Pakistan to become part of this initiative and accept the invitation. Pakistan really is starting with bare minimum expectations, which is immediate relief to the Palestinians, and a sense that this meeting does have a map to follow. If Donald Trump simply wants to collect donations, that's fine, but money is not going to translate into the outcome that Pakistan is looking for. It has to be Palestinian specific, it has to be Gaza peace driven, and it has to somehow push the momentum towards the creation of a Palestinian state. If the momentum is not unleashed, frankly, Pakistan's minimum expectations are not met, this would not be a very productive exercise from Pakistan's point of view. Well, India has a tendency to really miss the big boats these days. Yes, India is one of the movers and shakers of the new global economy that is emerging. But we saw India's fine balancing act getting tested when the Israelis and the Americans jointly locked horns with the Iranians when the strikes took place. Now remember, Iran and India have been very closely well knitted in terms of their investments and their interaction. But when it came to crunch time, India essentially chose the role of a fence sitter, but this was a fence sitter that was sitting more on the side of the Israelis than on the side of the Iranians. So it missed that boat altogether. On Gaza, when now a documented genocide was taking place, and I'm using this word in reference to the description given by the special UN rapporteur, Albanese description of what happened there. When the genocide was taking place, we didn't hear a whisper or a murmur out of Delhi, and the whole world was crying their hearts out for the suffering Palestinians, but we didn't really hear other than pontifications that things need to be settled down according to international law. I think India is too closely tied to Israel right now for it to take a clear stand on issues such as the right of self-determination for the Palestinians. And it also has perhaps gotten a window open with Donald Trump all over again. So therefore, it doesn't need to go via the Board of Peace initiative to engage with the Americans. And it wants to opt out.
That was Talat Hussain explaining why and why is it significant for the US. Now let's take this discussion further. And I'm being joined by Rami Kiouri, Middle East columnist and commentator, senior fellow at the Arab Center in Washington, joining us live. Hello to you, Mr. Rami. My first question to you is, can President Trump's proposed Board of Peace realistically change the situation in Palestine, especially in Gaza?
I think the short answer is probably not, almost certainly not. This is not a serious, diplomatic, legitimate, credible intervention. This is another step in a long-running Israeli-American joint venture to drive the Palestinians out of as much as Palestine as possible, Jerusalem, West Bank, Gaza, get them out and achieve the goals that the Zionist movement has been working on for about 110 years or so, which is to have a purely Jewish state in all of historic Palestine. And this is all the comments that people have made about the Board of Peace, the alleged Board of Peace, are correct. It has no Palestinian representation. It's not anchored in any legitimate international process. The events are all managed by Trump and a few of his hand-picked friends and the Israelis who were there. This reminds me of what happened in 1920 in Europe at the peace conference after the end of World War I, when the Zionists and the British, mostly then, got together and said there should be a Jewish state in Palestine, which the British didn't even fully occupy when they said that in 1917. But so this is a colonial process. It's a colonial process that's been going on for over 100 years. The Americans have replaced the British as the colonial main power. A lot of people get involved because whether countries in the Middle East or in Asia or in Europe, wherever they may be, because they're weak, they want to be close to Trump, they're afraid of being sanctioned, they don't have serious national sovereignty, and therefore to stay close to the U.S. Is probably your safest defense. But this is like the opening act of a traveling circus. There'll be a lot of light and sound and promises and money and action and drama, and very little will come out of it in the end. And we've seen it before. You remember the floating pier in Gaza that was supposed to bring in aid. You remember the humanitarian feeding process in Gaza that was supposed to help, and many other attempts like this completely fizzled out because they were not legitimate, they were not serious, and they were not even-handed. Any process that looks at the legitimate rights of the Israelis and the legitimate rights of the Palestinians will make progress. But we haven't had anything like that. And even the first phase of the ceasefire, the so-called ceasefire, which the Israelis and the Americans created, hasn't been implemented by Israel. It's still killing people. It's still denying them decent, even just decent tents, let alone housing, food, etc.
Could I please just quickly come in, Mr.
This is not
Rami?
a serious process. It's a mediagenic process. It's a public relations process, but it's also, more importantly, deeply anchored in a long colonial tradition in which the Israelis, Zionist movement, and Western powers work together to achieve their essentially their commercial and strategic
I would like to come in here
goals.
because you made an interesting point, and we will go back to that. What I'm also interested in knowing is, does the creation of the Board of Peace signal that the Palestinian cause is again gaining international attention and priority? Would you say that at least that much is happening?
No, I wouldn't.
Okay.
The Board of Peace is essentially detracting from the attention and legitimate action and international collaboration that's needed to bring about a resolution of the Zionist-Arabist conflict, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, however you want to phrase it. And this is not a serious effort to achieve peace. The Palestinians have charted out what needs to be done. They're willing to coexist with a Jewish majority Israeli state. Even Hamas has said this. There's no obstacle to a permanent peace agreement between a Jewish majority Israeli state and Palestinians and all the other Arabs in the region, and even the Iranians ultimately. But the Israelis don't want that. This is, I think, the point that people don't understand sufficiently is that the Israeli state and the Zionist movement before them and the Western colonial capitalist anchored mechanism centuries before that have not looked at the people of the region, the indigenous people, as people who have legitimate rights. And therefore, everything in Palestine is focused so far on helping giving the Israelis what they want. And this is why there's so much skepticism about the Board of Peace.
And
if they do suddenly decide to,
Mr. Rami, what does it mean? What does it mean that several GCC countries, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, have joined the Board of Peace, while countries within the European Union, just to take forward the point that you were making, have so far declined the invitation?
Well, every country has its own decisions, its own reasons for making decisions that it does. And it's not for me or you or anybody to question why they do it. If they think it's in their national interest, then they do it. If it's in the national interest of the small leadership groups in a different country or the people as a whole, that's up to them, really. But they all feel that the people who do join the Board of Peace join it because they want to be close to Trump and the U.S. They think maybe it gives them a seat and a seat at the table and a say, which it doesn't really. But many countries have refused to join for various reasons, not just because they don't think it's going to work. They think it's illegitimate. It's not anchored in international law and legitimacy. It sidelines the UN, and some people fear that this Board of Peace is going to try to replace the UN, which is delusional. So it's not going to happen. So I don't think we should give it very much attention, but just keep pushing for a serious, legitimate peace process that looks at Israelis and Palestinians as people who have equal rights, national rights, sovereignty rights, self-determination rights, and they all have the right to live in peace in their own country. This is not what the Board of Peace is trying to do. This is a mercantile, capitalist, carpet-bagging, money-making scheme that is designed to emphasize that the Palestinians have no voice, have no say, have no rights, and shouldn't be taken seriously. And this is what Jared Kushner has done for many years, what the American government has done, what the Western colonial governments have done for over a century. And this is just part of it. It's so clear, so obvious.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting point. And my final question to you is, what are President Trump's strategic motives here? What is it for the United States to gain from this?
The United States wants to be in command of most strategic decisions around the Middle East. It feels that its military power allows it to do that, and maybe its economic power as well. And they want to give Israel all the support that Israel needs, partly for strategic reasons, partly for domestic electoral reasons, partly because it's good business. There's many, many different angles to this. It's not just one reason. And partly because of the colonial imperative for both Israel and the United States, that they cannot allow any party in the region, Arab, Turkish, Iranian, whoever it may be, they cannot allow any party in the Arab Middle East region, West Asia, to challenge Israeli supremacy or American supremacy. And that's essentially what he's looking at, with the added dimension, which is unique to Trump, which is he wants to make money for himself and his family and his business associates and his golfing partners. And he's done that all his life, and he continues to do it. The thing about Trump is that he's facing enormous backlash. I live in the United States now mostly, and you see it here. It's quite stunning how people are pushing back. And the elections in November, the midterm elections, are going to show probably a serious loss to the Republican Party. And so the Trump phenomenon is probably a passing phenomenon. It's not a long-term one. We don't know what's going to replace it, but we'll find out soon. But in the meantime, people just try to stay on the good side of Trump, and one way to do it is to join these circus acts that he puts together. And today is the opening show.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramikuri, for helping us put that story into perspective. From one global crisis to another, the menace of deep fakes. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for the occupied Palestinian territories, has become one of the latest victims of a deepfake video. Albanese has long condemned Israel's genocide in Gaza, but in an AI-manipulated video, she was falsely accused of calling Israel the common enemy of humanity, something she never said. This could literally happen to anyone, which is why South Era Network's Sarah Gill decided to file a detailed report on this. Take a look.
I'm Sarah Gill, and I'm a reporter based in Islamabad. But the video you see below, you might think it's me. It might even sound like me, but that is a fake video. I'm Sarah Gill, and I'm a reporter based in London. And that video you're watching above, that's a fake video. She's lying to you. This is the real me. So the first video is the real video. I'm here in Islamabad, but we wanted to show you how easy it is to make fake videos. It took our editor about 10 minutes to manipulate my voice and to manipulate my image. But things like this keep happening time and time again, and even to senior officials. Most recently, Francesca Albanese, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories.
We have been spending the last 2 years.
After speaking at the Al Jazeera Forum, a manipulated video of her began circulating online. Her words were distorted and repackaged to make it appear that she had called Israel the enemy of humanity. She did not say that. But still, the doctored video was spread, and several European nations publicly called for her to step down from her role as UN Special Rapporteur. To counter the disinformation, she uploaded her full speech on X, where she described the system that has enabled a genocide as the common enemy, not Israel. In an interview with South Era Network, Albanese tells me the video is part of a wider effort to discredit her.
When I saw that video, what went through my mind was, again, really? Because it's probably the 12th time that it happens in the last 12 to 24 months. there are people following me. I've given thousands interviews. I've participated in 100 conference and public events. And I'm really looked at the microscope. Rarely something really usable is found, but they do find the things that they can chop and use it.
I also ask her the toll this has taken on her family.
I'm scared because I have children. I'm scared because I have a husband who's also being a target because of me. And at the same time, things have changed forever. There is a pre-genocide life, there is a post-genocide life. And whatever happens to me as a mandate holder, now, there are so many states asking for my resignation. Go ahead. Go ahead. I mean, you can hide, but you cannot run away. It's the other way around. You can run away from the truth, but you cannot hide. And it's clear what you're doing. You are defending a system whose political representatives are mentioned in the genocidal proceedings, in the proceedings concerning genocide of the International Court of Justice. You are defending a state who has two leaders who are wanted by the International Criminal Court. This is the reality.
For almost 2.5 years, Palestinians living in Gaza have endured a relentless and unwavering bombing campaign. If they aren't being killed by Israeli bombs, they are dying from starvation and disease. And in a world where people's words can be manipulated with just a few clicks, the reality of their suffering is under attack too. Because the doctored video of Francesca Albanese is an attempt to silence and discredit her, when in fact her job is to report on human rights violations in the occupied Palestinian territories. Deepfakes don't just target individuals, they distort reality, and in doing so, they make it harder for the world to see what's happening in Gaza. Sarah Gill, South Era Network, Islamabad, Pakistan.
It took my colleague Sarah in that package, if you saw, in that report, if you saw, she created a deep fake of hers. It took her roughly about 10 minutes to do that. Just imagine how easy it must be for those who do this on a daily basis. I think that's very concerning. And this needs to be discussed in detail. And that's why we have Erica Boyton joining us live. He is, of course, a professor of cybersecurity at the University of Leicester in the UK. My first question to you is, how advanced you think are these technologies to combat deepfakes?
Unfortunately, the technologies to combat it are not very advanced, or they're doomed to be losing. The deepfakes we see now are much harder to detect as being AI produced, and that will only get worse because systems for generating deepfakes can be optimized in order to filter out the sort of obvious signs of this is AI generated. And that has happened over the last few years. And as a consequence, the systems that are out there now are pretty much perfect, with very few of the obvious signs of six fingers on a hand and things blending into other things, and that we used to see a couple of years ago. You will see that in the Francesca Albanese story, the reason that it was found out that it was AI was not because the technical property of the film itself, but it was because she had the original, if you like. So provenance information, where a video actually comes from, and retaining the originals and making sure the originals are sort of signed, watermarked, is a partial solution to this, but it's not a solution for things that are made up out of the blue, of course.
That's an interesting point. I also want to talk to you about something that I worked on personally last year with the University of Missouri, where I was trying to develop a deepfake detection platform for them. And we found that most of our current deepfake detection platforms like Hive, etc., are trained on people who have white skin and who can speak either US accent or British accent English. Do you think that leaves out a large population, people of color, people belonging to Latinx communities, people belonging to South Asia?
Absolutely, that is generally a big problem in all sorts of image recognition, video, facial recognition systems. The training data is highly biased, and as a consequence, it will work better in some contexts than other contexts. And unfortunately, in most cases, this has started. These techniques have trained in the first place on white men like myself. And that makes them less reliable in other contexts, for example, in South Asia. And it works in two directions, right? Facial recognition technology that works really well is pernicious because it's effective surveillance of people, whereas facial recognition that works really badly is also pernicious because it misidentifies the wrong people as potential criminals or whatever else you're looking for. So it's a no-win situation to start with, but you get different effects in different parts of the world if the data is racially biased.
And that's a big concern. That's a big concern, and that has to be addressed. But we'll leave it there. We'll leave that discussion aside for now, because I also want to talk about what about the political scale. On a political scale, do we have more examples of how deepfakes were used to spread disinformation or tarnish the reputation of opponents?
I think there was a video of Joe Biden at one point, which turned out to be fake, and this is only going to get worse, right? It started sort of nicely in my corner of cybersecurity with people faking voice recognition system in order to pretend to be the boss or the financial manager of a company and slush big amounts of money out, and we've seen it hit in abuse of women, essentially through grokked undressing techniques, producing naked deepfake videos, particularly of women. It's only going to get worse, and in the political sense, it's going to get worse. Alongside everything else that happens with fake news, it is going to erode confidence in what people actually see and hear. And some of what you're seeing there, it's not the deception of the individual piece that you need to worry about, but it's the idea that once you get into the business of discrediting bits of film that people share, then all the authentic stuff also gets shared. You will have seen the confusion, the deliberate confusion around the shooting by ICE of a couple of people in America in the last few weeks. The people were very quickly saying, well, these videos that people have published, they must be fakes. And because there are fakes out there, that becomes a little bit more credible than is comfortable for us.
If I've understood correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is that the technology to develop, to generate deepfakes is being developed at a breakneck speed, whereas technologies, platforms meant to debunk them, to detect them, is not keeping up. So in this race, we are already losing. Is that correct?
Yeah, worse than that. I think the race is in principle lost because the people refining the technology to produce credible deepfakes also have access to the detection technology, and they can use the detection technology to filter out, to retrain their systems to filter out the things that look not credible enough. So every bit of detection technology works at a snapshot of how the world was at the point it got trained, and then the world out there can retrain on making sure that it deceives all the deception technologies that's out there. It's lost in principle.
We'll leave it there. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much to you, K. Boyton, for helping us decode the real dangers of deepfakes and for also offering realistic solutions. Unfortunately, deepfakes aren't the only problem the world is facing. Tensions between Washington and Tehran appear to be entering a more delicate phase, with military preparations and strategic signaling intensifying on both sides. In the US, national security advisors were informed that American force deployment will be fully in place in the Middle East by mid-March. On the other hand, Tehran on Thursday issued a notice to Yemen closing off its southern airspace for testing rockets. Those are a lot of developments to understand and to make sense of what all this actually means. My colleague Leticia Castro spoke earlier to Paul Ingram, a policy analyst at the University of Cambridge. Listen in.
The U.S. and Iran are holding indirect talks in Geneva, with Oman helping mediate. The goal is simple: reduce tensions and find a way forward on Iran's nuclear program. Iran says there's agreement on basic guiding principles for a possible deal, while the U.S. calls the talks constructive. But both sides say there's still work to do. So what does that actually mean? That's the big question. I'm joined today by Paul Ingram, policy analyst at the University of Cambridge. Paul is connecting with us directly from London. Thank you for being here. First, when both sides say progress, is this a real step toward a deal or just diplomatic language? What's your take on that?
I think it's an opening of the conversation, and I think both sides are listening to one another. But I think it's at this stage, it's simply a case of information exchange. I don't think there's any evidence at all that either side is moving substantially from its position, although, of course, we are looking from outside, and it's very difficult to know what is going on in private.
I understand. So how close is Iran to being able to build a nuclear weapon if it decided to do so, taking into consideration what your opinion is on an agreement itself?
Well, the overwhelming belief is that Iran has over 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium to 60% of uranium-235, which essentially means that they are a very small step away from having an arsenal of around 10 nuclear weapons. There's certainly the essential material in the core of the nuclear warhead. The Iranians have not an extensive capability to immediately rush to create those nuclear weapons, but there is a general belief that were they to choose to do so, they have the industrial and technical capability of putting this arsenal together. The fact that they haven't up to now, I think, is a testimony to the politics within the country, which is far from being universally behind a nuclear arsenal, and the concerns within Iran that they are deeply compromised by foreign assets operating inside the country.
And how does this affect the entire region?
So there is some deep concern in neighbors that Iran could go nuclear were it to choose to do so. The Saudis are building up their capacity technically to develop nuclear weapon capability, and there is some gossip, I don't put too much store by it, that the Pakistanis have been supplying the Saudis with nuclear weapon technology or even weapons themselves. But I think what we're seeing is a region that is very, very on edge. We see the buildup of US military forces in the Indian Ocean, and the further support from the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, which is due in the region in the next few weeks. And the belief amongst many US watchers is that the Americans are most definitely preparing to hit Iran at any moment. Nobody in the region wants this, apart from perhaps Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israelis. But the momentum appears to be very difficult to stop or to see any other outcome other than a US strike.
Right. We've seen that there's definitely a large presence of U.S. military in the region. What do you think that would have as far as an outcome for the entire region, for the entire Middle East?
So those of us that have been looking at this for a long time, we've seen this situation build up before on a number of occasions, but I think this situation is different. I think we have a US president that takes great pleasure in being unpredictable. We see him willing to take military action where I think previous administrations would have been more cautious. I think that if the Americans do attack, it's going to be a much more significant attack than last June. And I have very little doubt that the Iranians will respond with force and much more than they did in June. And I think what you're likely to see are significant attacks on Israel and American bases in the region. And that it'll be very difficult for other regional actors to stay out of that confrontation. I think what we're seeing within Iran is a sense that the reckoning that has been building up over several years is at this moment likely to boil over.
And you mentioned unpredictable. Definitely, it's a situation that brings about a bit more instability in the region itself, but also when it comes to the possibility of an outlook as far as when this could boil over precisely. A lot of experts are talking about this weekend, Sunday even. What's your take on that?
So the Americans, if they were to attack this weekend, and they're perfectly capable of doing so, would do so before their second aircraft carrier were to arrive in the region. Now, Trump has already demonstrated that he's willing to strike prematurely before he's built up all the assets. This weekend is perfectly possible. If we see this weekend come and pass without an attack, I don't think that means that the likelihood is going to be less. I think unless we see some breakthrough in the talks, I think that we see an inexorable, unavoidable, almost attack on Iran this weekend or in the coming 2 or 3 weeks.
Definitely a complicated situation for the entire region and worldwide. Paul Ingram, thank you so much for your insight, joining us live from London. We'll be following closely all the developments in regards to this complicated situation here at South Air Network.
Paul Ingram there telling my colleague Leticia that for now he feels that this is just information exchange and neither of the sides are really moving forward. But even as both sides say some progress has been made in recent indirect talks, the United States insists it will prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon and warns that all options, including force, remain on the table. To discuss that, let us turn to our North America correspondent, Michael Shiguri, to get more insight on how the U.S. sees the nuclear talks with Iran. My first question to you, Michael, is what does the United States really want from Iran in the nuclear deal? What's in it for the United States?
Well, it all comes back to stopping Iran from having the ability to create nuclear weapons, which in turn would increase Israel's security in the region as U.S.'s primary ally. So what does that entail? Obviously, that entails what our previous guest just mentioned, which is limiting uranium enrichment and dismantling facilities and infrastructure that could allow Iran to develop nuclear weapons and nuclear capabilities. In addition to that, the Trump administration has brought up the issue of ballistic missiles, long-range ballistic missiles, which have been used to attack Israel in the past. So that is definitely on the table as well in terms of what they are looking for. Given the recent developments over the last few months with the protests in Iran, there could be elements of trying to enforce Iran's government to comply and open up in terms of human rights. But details on that are not necessarily coming out at the moment. But overall, it all does come down to their capability, limiting Iran's capability to develop nuclear weapons.
And now that we have discussed about the present, Michael, let's zoom back to the past. What happened in the year 2015? Why did the US leave the 2015 US-Iran nuclear agreement?
Well, that really comes back to President Donald Trump and his actions in his first term. Different people may have different opinions about this, but one thing that was consistent was he really wanted to dismantle a lot of the achievements of his predecessor, Barack Obama, which did include this deal. At the same time, Trump and his administration were trying to be closer aligned with Israel's policy within the region. Israel was known during that time, during Obama's administration, to be very against this Iranian deal. And also what I mentioned earlier, that the deal in 2015 did not factor in long-range ballistic missiles, which is, again, another reason why Israel was so against the deal. So I think when you factor all those three factors in, that really was the primary source of Trump making the decision to pull out of the deal, similar to other deals he had as well, including the climate change accord, the Paris Agreement, and there are multiple other examples where it really just felt he was very much trying to undo achievements of the former administration.
Let's now again come back to what's really happening right now. Is the United States focusing, do you think, more on diplomacy or pressure in dealing with Iran, or is it a mix of both?
I think it's definitely a mix of both. Theodore Roosevelt said, speak softly but carry a big stick. It seems like Trump is taking his own page out of that playbook. Speak strongly and carry a big stick, which he's doing both of. He has made big words that bad things will happen if a deal is not reached. That's one of his most recent quotes here. So that's definitely speaking strongly. In addition to moving U.S. military forces into the region, into the Gulf, including ships and aircraft. So I would say, again, it's doing both. It's a mix of both for sure. We'll yet to see. Hopefully there is a breakthrough in terms of talks. But if not, the U.S. is ready to strike. And I'm sure there are being plans set up right now for that situation.
That's a very interesting perspective to gain from you, Michael. That conversation will shortly be put up on our social media platforms as well. Thank you so much to Michael for helping us make some sense of that story. With that, we have come to the end of our show. But before we leave you, we want to show you these visuals. We are leaving you with these visuals of AI rivalry playing out on the big stage. Dario Amodei, the CEO of Entropy, and Sam Altman seemingly refusing to hold hands even after India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi prodded them to. Take a look. And with that, it's the end of this show. Thank you so much for watching.